Carthage must be destroyed. We're going to continue with our Clash of Spears walkthrough today, and we are going to get into what is called the game turn, the chapter 4 of the rulebook here. Now this section is a little longer, and I didn't want to break up my videos into twos, but I think I might have to for this section. So we will see as we film here how much I get done. But let's just jump right into the game turn. Now the rulebook comes with this really handy cheat sheet, or I don't know if it comes with it. I knew the Kickstarter came with it, but I don't know if the rulebook comes with it. But this is, I don't know if this was a Kickstarter add-on, but I have this laminated nice sheet of a summary of the rules basically. But what we're going to look at here first of all is the sequence of play. That's the first part of the game turn. We're going to be looking at the strategy phase, where you replenish CP, roll initiative, activation phase where you actually get to do things, and the end phase where it says recover units, check victory conditions, and so on, and then go on. So yeah, Clash of Spears is a game that per turn is divided into 3 separate phases there. And basically, it's not like some games where you have one side do their entire turn and then the second side do the entire turn. Both players are going to be active throughout the entire turn. So nobody has to sit back and wait for the other person to finish. You're going to be active in the game all the time. Alright? So the first phase here, and I'll just go through them quickly, is the strategy phase. The strategy phase is going to involve your commanders and rolling for initiative. Your commanders here, I've got a commander here. I've used some Hail Caesar bases. They're not quite appropriate for Clash of Spears, I think, with a bit bigger. But I got a commander here and a commander there. In this part of the phase, they would replenish their command points for their characters. We talked about command points before. And after that, they bid and roll for initiative. So this game uses a system where whoever's going to take the first turn, or rather the first activation, let's say, you're going to roll some dice here and figure out who gets to go first. We'll go into that in a moment here. And then, unlike other games, in Clash of Spears, you have the activation phase coming next. And the activation phase, of course, is going to involve your units and what they can and can't do. Now, in most games you might have like your whole army go at one side. But in Clash of Spears here, you activate a unit or a character first, and there's different things you can do. We'll talk about that soon. And then while you're moving, the opponent has a chance to react to it. So while you're activating a unit, there also might be reactions during that turn. And then what happens is that you switch the roles. So you're going to activate one side. He gets a chance to react if he wants to. Then if not, then it goes to this side. They get to act with a unit. So you kind of got back and forth and constant engagement in the game. So you can't just sit back and wait it out or eat something on the side. You should just continue watching the game and see what happens. And then, of course, every turn has something like an end phase where you're going to remove activation tokens. There's fatigue recovery, and then there's also some delayed effects, and we will go through that as well. Also, you'll check victory conditions and some other effects that happen. So let's get into more detail about the strategy phase. So we'll pull up a close shot on my commander here of the Punic War of Carthaginian forces. He's just generic kind of Samnite or Greek guy. I don't know what he is. But in any case, in the strategy phase, this character, he would be replenishing his command points. Now, if they're attached to a unit, they're going to have one less command point on their profile. So if this guy was part of this unit here, he'd have one less in the replenish phase. The next thing you do, so once he's replenished command points and your buddy over here, not your buddy, your enemy over here has replenished the command points, you're going to start to bid for initiative. Now, bidding for initiative involves using command points. What you're going to do is you're going to select a number of command points to influence an initiative roll. What you do when you bid is you're rolling a single d6 here. So I got a d6 here. Now let's say he uses 1 command point and he uses 2, and they're going to roll for initiative here. He rolls a 3 and he secretly chose 1, so that becomes a 4. And let's see what he gets here. The other side rolls a 2. He added 3. Or he had a 2, so it's 4. It's a tie here, so there's also things to do in a tie. But this is an example of how you use command points to put into your bid, your roll to take the initiative. And that simply helps you to determine the order of who's the active player and who isn't during the phases. You can also, if you have multiple commanders, you don't have to just take it from one commander. You can actually use it from all characters you have. If you don't have just one character, maybe you got Bob, Bill, and Jill here. You know, all three of them could contribute 1 point for a total of 3 command points. Okay. Now, if there was a draw, like in this case, you just simply re-roll with the modifiers until you get a winner. And they do kind of have a fairness thing going here, where if you say roll a draw the first turn and then you re-roll here, and this guy say wins, if you roll a draw in the second strategy phase, you're just gonna give it to this guy, just I guess for fairness sake. So keep that in mind. If not, you just keep battling it out on the dice. So if you won the bid for initiative, you get to decide who becomes the active player first, and that's important because you may want to start as the active player, or you want your enemy to be the active player first. And we're getting into the activation phase now here. In Clash of Spears, you alternate between the active and the reactive player. Okay, so we're going to have actions and reactions coming up here. So let's say Mr. Carthaginian guy, Mr. Sam Knight here, he won the bid and he decides he's going to go first in this scenario, the situation. He wants to be the active player first, and he's going to choose his units and do his stuff like that. We'll get into more of that soon, but he's going to activate, let's say he goes with this unit here. He can decide to do 3 things. He can basically activate a unit or a character model. He can rest or rally a unit, or he could pass. And this is by unit basis. So, say he activates this unit, does his stuff, they react, they then switch the roles, and then he would become the active player. He would activate a unit or a character or do whatever, and then they'd switch back and forth until everything is complete. So if you choose to activate a unit or a character, you're basically doing exactly that. You're going to take a character or a unit and have them activate. Or a character can use command points or something of the like to activate a unit nearby. Now, we'll talk about that more, what actions they can and can't do in a bit, but that's basically you activate unit or character. You can also rest or rally a unit, and I think that's pretty straightforward. We'll talk about what happens in resting and rallying soon. You're just recovering fatigue, or you can pass and they just decide to do nothing. You know, you just switch your action, you skip your active phase, and then you just go let the opponent be the active one. And then, so for actually activating units and character models, what you have to do is, in order to activate it, you have to spend a command point. So if he wants to activate this unit here, he has to spend a command point, and if it's beyond his command range, his CR, he's going to have to spend 2 command points. Okay, now if he uses a command point to activate this unit, then if they have no fatigue markings on them, they'll just go ahead and fulfill that activation. However, if they have any fatigue tokens, or if they're fatigued in any way here, they are going to have to do a test, an activation test, to see if they're actually able to activate with that fatigue on top of them. And now this test is done on 2d6 like so, and then you would roll the 2d6 and compare it to its grit stat. And when you look at the grit stat, you have to exceed or match the stat that they are. And then, of course, if you have fatigue and the like, you can have modifiers on top of that. Now, if you fail that activation test and it ends up being lower than the unit's grit, then they just they basically rest. They don't do anything. They sit there resting, and we'll talk about what happens when you rest soon. Furthermore, a commander or a character can also spend an extra command point to increase those dice by 1d6. So every command point they add in, they can add another. Actually, I think it says the player can only roll 3d6, so you can't go beyond 3. There's nothing that says you can or can't, but I'm assuming 3 is the maximum. Because, I mean, if you throw all your command points in one unit, it might not be the best thing to do. But yeah, basically you can increase the odds if they're really tired or something, or you want them to have absolute success. You can add another command point to increase the amount of dice you can roll to test the activation. You also don't have to draw just points from one commander. You can actually have, like, if you had another commander nearby within the command range, then you can actually add another commander's command points to that, and that's just to represent, like, commanders working together to give a unit an order, or you know, oftentimes there's more than one guy giving out orders. I know sometimes too many cooks is not good, but in this game, in this case, only 2 commanders or 3 commanders around shouldn't be a problem. They're actually helping more than hurting. And it's not just units that'll have to test for fatigue. If the characters are doing any kind of activation as well, they also have to test. So they're not immune to fatigue. They have rules of fatigue as well. Like, you know, leaders get tired too. They're not flawless or anything like that. So, but yeah, basically it's a system of using command points, telling them what to do, and then activating them based on the fatigue or if they're not fatigued. So, when a unit becomes active, let's say that these guys have become active, you will state, okay, he passed the test, he's now the active unit. What will happen is that he will do whatever action he says, and we'll talk about the actions they can do soon. But he says whatever action he wants to do, he declares it, and then he executes that first action. After the first action occurs, they can choose to react. They have the option of having a reaction before the enemy continues, right? So they say, they activate, they do their thing, then he's done his first action, then these guys jump up and they could have a reaction to respond to that. And we'll talk about their options very soon here. And the reaction doesn't have to be a unit nearby or something nearby. It could be a totally different unit that's not related to this unit. Like say we have a bigger board here, this guy activates, he does his action. A unit way over here, this guy could decide, maybe he's planning to come around here and do something. He can plan to react from a unit back here. So it doesn't have to be a nearby unit or something in the proximity like other games. You can actually have something else react in response to that. Maybe he's counter flanking or something like that. I don't know, it depends on the game. So, and if you do want to commit a reaction, or you do want to have a character have a unit react, again, there's some rules. The commander on the other side, the command range rather, of the character, it has to be within command range, and it has to have a command point enabled to actually spend for the reaction. They also, if for whatever reason, if an enemy in his activation turn just caused 2 fatigue points to unit, that particular unit wouldn't be able to react to anything, okay? So the unit just gained 2 fatigue points because of a moral test, actually. That's going to affect their action. They won't be able to react. And that's just to represent that they've been stalled or they've been hurt or hit by something and they need a moment to compose. They won't be able to take the moment they won't be able to take a moment to react because they need that moment to stall and just be composed. And again, it doesn't have to be the same commander. It has to be the commander within the command range. It could be 2 commanders in the command range to attempt the reaction. Now, in this situation, you do again have to test an activation test. However, they're unlike units here where they don't, if a unit has no fatigue on it in the activation phase, they can just go ahead with it. But even if they have fatigue or not, they have to test regardless. So reactions will always have a test, fatigue or not, and you will still apply the modifiers, and matching and exceeding the grit is what you want to do to pass. And just like the activation phase, you can spend another CP and add another dice. Reactions are actually 1d6, so you can react, but it seems like you get a little more penalty on the dice roll to match the grit because, of course, reacting to something quickly would be harder than being the first to carry it out. So when you're doing an activation, you're rolling to activation tests when they're fatigued with 2 dice, and then you can add a command point to make it 3d6 to pass that test. Whereas if you're reacting, you only get 1 dice to test for the reaction. And remember, even if they're fatigued or not, they're going to be rolling this to test with their grit, and then you can just spend a further command point from a source within range, command range, to add another 2d6. And if you get one of those, they'll pass. And of course, if you fail the reaction test, nothing happens, and you don't react, and then the active player can continue going. And then, of course, if you do pass, you're going to interrupt his activation phase and fulfill the action that you tested for just there. So it's kind of an interruption into the sequence of play. Now, when that reaction does happen, these guys carry out a single action as the reaction, okay? And if that does happen, if the reaction is executed, that means that the active unit, which would be this one, gains 2 fatigue points, and then it's stalled because suddenly they moved around and they're trying to react. They stop suddenly, and then they switch roles. So if you successfully react to something, they're going to stop. They're going to be fatigued for a moment for, I guess, composure reasons, and then these guys become the active player. Okay, so that's I think that's a lot to take in just from going through the rules here and trying to explain how it works. And I think examples are probably going to be better when we get to them. But just for now, let's keep that in mind. That's how it kind of works. It's kind of a back and forth kind of react and take the active phase, or wait until his action's done and then it becomes your action phase. So it's kind of a back and forth system here. And then if this guy attempted to react and failed, this guy could do another action. He could attempt to react again, but you're only ever allowed to do one reaction to the actual action. You can't do multiple reactions at all. So when a unit does become active, let's push this book aside here. When a unit does become active, they are able to execute up to 3 actions here. So that's what I'm talking about when they can move up. I just said previously that these guys can react each time to each action. They can do up to 3 actions when they're activated. And so what does this mean? It's important why we use these tokens. I don't have them out right now. I should have brought them out maybe. But if a unit is activated, if it's the active unit, they're going to have a token saying it's active. Now, they could use an action and move once here. And then the active player finishes his turn, or he reacts, takes it, or he stops, whatever happens. Later on in the phase, if he still has 2 actions left and he still has command points to give the orders, a commander and character could have them activate later. Okay, you could have it where if this guy activated, say, I don't know, let's just say they wanted to do some plan, they do something first, they want to wait to see what happens over here. They're able to hold off, and then later on in the active player's phase, as long as they have their actions left, they got up to 3, they could activate again using command points, using the same system here to make them go off. So you could potentially maybe move a unit up, have them wait, and then see what they do, and then charge them in later on. So it's kind of like, you're giving direct orders, close up and personal, just waiting and reacting. So it's kind of, in this phase, it's kind of a game of back and forth, trying to test each other's, command metal to see how the activations work. And now that's what the activation tokens are for in this game. And I think I'll pop them out when we have, I don't want to take them off their little MDF sprue yet. I'm going to wait for that. But when we start doing some more game examples on solo gaming, you're going to put action tokens on here and to just mark how many actions they've taken per turn, right? So if they did 1, you don't want to forget that they moved once and they still possibly could do 2 more during the activation phase. So yeah, basically 3 activation tokens, and once you get to 4, once you've done 3 actions, you're done. You can't move the character unit anymore, and that's it. And that also counts for reactions. Just make that clear. A reaction will also give you an activation token. So reacting will also put one of them on there, and you can't go beyond 3. So a unit couldn't react beyond 3 or anything like that. They can only do activations and reactions up to 3 times, basically. So every time a unit acts or reacts, they get one of those tokens on, and during the activation phase, they can only do that 3 times maximum. Now we'll get into the activation stuff, exactly what you can do in an activation and reaction later. But we're going to talk about resting and rallying first. So what you can do instead of activating them is tell them that they're going to rest. The unit's just going to rest. You don't need to do an activation test for this. The unit just does it. Now, when they do rest, you simply remove a fatigue point from them. And even though resting is not really an action, they still accumulate for the activation phase an action token. So resting is going to subtract a fatigue, and then you're going to add an action token on it. So afterwards, if you rest once, you would only be able to react twice more if they continue to do that. You can then, if a commander's nearby, you can spend a command point to, actually I think it's, you spend 2 command points rather, you can transform that rest into a full rally. So these guys would rest, and then you use a command or 2 command points there, and you have a chance that you can rally himself or another character when you have this happen. And what you do is with these 2 command points, you get to roll 1d6 per command point, roll a dice, and it says here without any fatigue modifier, so that's good. And then you try to exceed, or you try to match the grit, and if you reach it, they get to subtract another fatigue point, and you can have a chance to do that twice. That's the rally. So they get to rest, they remove a fatigue, put an action point on it, then a nearby commander within range can spend CP to basically rally them, take more fatigue off of there. Okay? Now, you can only do this rally if you actively chose to rest. Okay? You can't do it after you've failed an activation test. So you have to rest first and then transform it into a rally. And once you rest or you rally a unit completely, you switch roles. The active player becomes the reactive player. And the last option to do is just to pass. Now, I was a little confused when I was reading this and looking at it, because pass here seems to be your whole turn, all of your stuff. If you choose to pass your active phase, I guess, does that mean that you're passing a single unit, or are you passing everything? To me, it seems that maybe it's better if you don't want to activate a unit to rest them, let them be. Whereas pass seems to be where it says in the rules here, if both sides choose to pass in succession, the activation phase is over. So I'm not exactly clear on how that means. Like, does that mean I can pass, he acts, can I still react and act again per unit? Or if I pass and I pass the whole thing? I'm not quite sure, but we'll figure it out when we when we get into it. But you can choose to pass. If both players pass and don't do actions, you just jump into the end phase, is what it's trying to say. And I think for filming purposes, this is all I'm going to do today. I'm not going to get into the actions, because the next part of the book, and I'll just show you guys quickly here, it's all the different actions you have, and I think that's going to take a little more coordination, a little more planning on my part, just to represent it, maybe show more examples if I can. It's a few pages here, but yeah, today that's where we're going to end. We're just going to basically talk about how we talked about how strategy phase kind of works, and the activation phase, when you're basically how you activate units and jumping between the active and reactive units. So next time we'll get right into the activation phase, and well, we are in the activation phase. Next time we'll get into the actual actions and talk about that, because I think this video is going to be too long if I keep talking on here. So that's it for now. Next time we'll get into the actions. So thank you all for watching. Please like and subscribe. We will continue this series as we continue on through the walkthrough, and we will look at other content, blogs and unboxings and all the like. So thank you all for watching, and have a good one.